Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessikah, Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hello, I'm Jen. I'm the co-host today.
And we're really excited because this is one of those books that as soon as I saw it, I was like, this is perfect. This is 100% my jam. I spent 15 years in the children's department of the library. This was the type of book that I would have adored when I was a kid. This is the type of book I told a million kids to read. And this book is written by Rob Renzetti, who has also been involved in so many projects that were formative in my own childhood, in my brother's childhood, in Jen's childhood, and also in my kids' childhood, because we have both Kid Cosmic and Gravity Falls on repeat constantly in this house. So I can't wait to give them the horrible bag of terrible things to read. Welcome, Rob. Tell us about this book.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. I am 200 years old. That's why I've influenced many generations of children.
201. Come on.
Well, yeah, I just turned 201, actually. My birthday was in September. So, but I like to keep it round and simple. So let's just say 200. The horrible bag of terrible things. Here it is. Yay! Product placement. It's my first original novel. I've written 4 books for Disney Publishing before this, including a couple of spin-offs from Gravity Falls, including Journal Number 3, which I'm very proud of and was a New York Times bestseller. But while I was writing all those books, I really wanted to write my own original one. And I came up with an idea that I really loved, and I put it into action. And that's The Horrible Bag of Terrible Things, which briefly concerns a horrible bag that pops up on Zenith Maelstrom, our 11-year-old protagonist. It's on his doorstep one day. He doesn't know where it came from. He doesn't know who sent it there. But he is a very curious kid, and he brings it inside unwisely. It seems to be empty until he pricks his finger on it, and he offers a little bit of blood to it. And all of a sudden, the bag becomes active. This horrible or terrible thing comes out of it. It's like a kind of a half hairball, half spider creature, which he later dubs a Schlurp. And the Schlurp hides in his house for a while, and then ends up kidnapping his older 14-year-old sister Apogee and dragging her back into the bag illogically, because the bag's not that big. What he discovers is that there's a whole world hiding inside the bag, that it's a portal to another dimension. And he has to travel to a land called Grabog in an effort to find and save his sister.
So this book is so much fun, and you're welcome. And I'm curious, just to start off, about how the other aspects of your career have maybe informed the writing of this, because you've worked in children's media for a long time. And I'm wondering if you think that's given you a special perspective, or if it gave you a unique strategy when approaching writing a book for children.
I hate to use the words special and unique in reference to myself, because I'm a Midwestern boy and we're inevitably humble. But the perspective that it gave me was that I was used to working on a deadline. And in this case, I kind of had to set my own deadline. I actually started this book. I decided in 2018, it was my New Year's resolution, that I was going to get up an hour early and write this book before I had to go to my paying job at Disney Television Animation. So starting in 2018, I got up an hour early, and I just spent an hour writing whatever I could write. I'd had the idea, and I'd made some notes on it before that, but I hadn't really seriously approached it. And even though I had this goal for a long time of writing my own original stories, I decided in 2018, okay, let's make this a real thing. Let's commit to it. So I did that. And by the end of 2018, I'm not sure where I was at, but I think by the end, I had a first draft. Now that I remember, around the holidays, I had about a first draft done, and I decided, put it aside, enjoy the end of the year, just relax, come to it with fresh eyes in the next year. And so I kept working at it until I was ready to go out. I felt like I had after showing it to a couple of readers, felt like I had something that I might want to try and send out into the world. And then I got my literary agent, and we put it all together, and finally it got picked up after just a short time on the market by Penguin Random House. So the discipline that I had to instill in myself, that's something I learned from because in animation, your schedule is that your master and your nemesis and everything in between. I mean, you don't have a choice. You have to be creative on a schedule. So you don't have the luxury of just like letting something ruminate forever. You let it ruminate a little bit, and then you gotta put pen to paper or put fingers to the keyboard and get something done. So that's one way that it certainly influenced my writing. As far as my perspective and I've been writing for this audience. Most of the shows I've worked on are geared towards middle grade kids. So whether I'm right, well, I didn't even know if I was writing a middle grade story. I thought I was just kind of writing what I like and kind of gearing it, I thought, towards that audience. And I was like, we'll see what the publishing thinks of this, because I know what a cartoon for kids are supposed to look like, but I wasn't sure what a book for kids, if it was going to be about the same thing. And luckily the literary agent, Ruben Pfeffer, he loved it, wanted to sign me. Penguin Random House loved it. They seemed to think I'd hit the target. So hopefully the kids will agree.
So first of all, I have to say, like way back when we started this conversation, like 201 years ago,
Yes.
you you described the book and you said briefly, and part of me was like, was that a bag pun or
But probably, but not on purpose.
a happy coincidence? But one thing I wanted to say, especially about this book and just what you were just talking about writing a book that you would like, and also writing for middle grade kids. I think something that comes out in the Horrible Bag of Terrible Things, and also just, in all of the animation writing that you've worked in, is that, yeah, okay, so you're writing a book or a series or something that's for middle grade kids, but you're not talking down to them. It's enjoyable to you. Like, I think there was something that I'd read a long time ago, and I think I've read this from a lot of different people, and also, just in general, I think DJ McHale had said it about what was that show? The Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like a kid will always, and maybe I'm not DJ. I'm sorry if I'm misquoting you, but the idea is, and this is also dealing with children's horror, which this is that a kid will know when you're talking down to them. If a kid is reading a book and you are writing something, and in your mind, I think this is for children, a kid will pick up on that in a second. There's a wry humor, there's some bite literally to this book, and it's funny and scary, and it's intriguing, and it's enjoyable to me as an adult, which is like another thing about this genre, is that it should be enjoyable to all, because you want your kid to come home and tell you about this great book that you read, and it's got to sound interesting and wild and wacky. So this book absolutely hits all of those notes. I have to ask, so why Zenith and Apogee as names for the kids?
Great.
Well, thank you for all that litany of compliments you just unleashed on me. Zenith and Apogee. Okay, so part of that, I don't have any kids of my own, believe it or not. I think I never really truly grew up, and that's why I don't have a problem writing for kids, just to talk about all the points you just made. But I don't talk to them. I write something that I think I would like, and hopefully they will too. But Zenith and Apogee, the names are kind of a gentle. There were a couple things. They mean the same thing, kind of. They kind of have the same definition. That's one thing about them. The more superficial answer was, like, I have a lot of friends who've named their kids very silly names. That like the epitome, like the end, the culmination of all Western civilization is what they're trying to get across with their names for their kids. So I thought Zenith and Apogee were appropriate. They were kind of, full of self-importance when they were their parents, when they named them, because they both mean the height or the climax or whatever of things. But I also like the kind of the A and Z of it, the fact that Apogee's at the beginning, Z is at the end, Zenith's at the end. That there is in the book, there is this struggle, especially from Zenith's perspective, about, like, he doesn't want his sister to be the boss of him. He died to be the older sibling. He wants to be not bossed around anymore. And he pushes up against everybody telling him what to do, especially Apogee, because they have a prior history where when she was a little bit younger, they were, as Apogee would put it, thick thieves. They were always getting into trouble together. And then something changed. She became a teenager and something changed. and he's both regretting, he's missing their old relationship and angry and resentful that now he seems to have another parent in the house besides his mom and his dad. So there were a few different reasons why I did that. The first was that kind of superficial reason of kind of gently poking fun at my friends and what they were naming their kids. And then I just thought that the meanings of the names also helped kind of tell the story.
I was really interested in what you just said about, you know, the sibling dynamics. And I was thinking about that in terms of what you had just said about, you know, creating children's media because like yourself, you know, you haven't grown up just a little bit, you know, in there.
Right.
And I feel like that's really important. And I think they're linked because, you know, the intensity of like sibling dynamics is something that as you age, you tend to like kind of forget about because age kind of equals you out after a while, you know, like there's not as big a difference between like a 32-year-old and a 35-year-old as like a 7 and a 10-year-old. So do you think like that little bit of not growing up is necessary, you know, in order to like remember those things that you don't really spend as much time thinking about as a grown-up?
I mean, I think so. I mean, look, I'm the adult I am, so I can't judge other adults, but let's judge them for a minute. I tend to think a lot of adults forget what it's like to be a child, and that's maybe purposeful, but also lazy. So that when they do name their kids something silly or really stupid, they don't realize your kid will be mocked on the playground for this silly, stupid name you just gave them. You know, it sounds unique to you, and you had a great moment of expressing your own ego by naming your kid something ridiculous, but now they have to live with that for the rest of their life until they can decide that they want to be called something different. And I mean, I never forgot. Luckily I wasn't mocked too hard, but I had my moments when I was teased throughout school all the time. It's horrible, like, you know, being the center of attention in that negative way and getting laughed at by a bunch of people. How horrible. So I mean, I would hope that if I had ever become a father, that I would have approached things with a little bit more empathy for what kids have to go through. But who knows? Maybe if I had become a father, I would have forgotten how to become a child, and I would have reverted to my father. I certainly see my tendencies, my father, even without having a kid of my own, where, you know, the worst aspects of his personality sometimes come out in like wanting everything neat and clean around the house when it's not really that necessary, and those kind of what I would say adult instincts that don't really serve children so well. Okay, I think I've kind of reached the end of that answer. Have I? I kind of got lost.
So I want to talk a little bit about just in general. So first of all, why a bag?
Why a bag? Well, two reasons. There's a couple. One, my wife came up with it, but she came up with it in this way. Speaking about keeping the house clean again, we don't do a very good job of that. We're both pack rats, especially my wife. We both hoard every piece of paper that comes in the house for the most remote reasons. But every once in a while, we'll get a mania and we'll decide we're going to clean up. Okay, so we're going to clean and straighten everything up. And usually we do a good job of that. Sometimes we do kind of a slapdash fast job of that, and we just like toss all our old phone bills or credit card bills into a shopping bag and throw it out of the view whoever's coming over, or whatever reason we've decided we have to clean up. So one of those bags existed, and it was sitting there glowering at us from the corner, and she started calling it the horrible bag of terrible things. And I just love, she's got a, you know, she's good with phrases, and I just remembered that phrase and really clicked into it. And it didn't really mean anything for a while, but then eventually I came up with the story that would make sense with the title. The other reason is I was really a huge fan of the 1960s Felix cartoons, which showed on my local UHF station when I was a kid. And in that cartoon, Felix had this bag of tricks, which the horrible bag very much is shaped like this silhouette is the shape of Felix's bag of tricks. The design's a little bit more disturbing. His is yellow with a nice little pattern on it. But that bag was just, it was like he could reach into it, get anything he needed. It would, I think it transformed. It was I just really loved that as a kid. So in fact, I've got a magnet on my fridge to this day of Felix holding his bag of tricks. So I just have always loved that concept. So it was the two of them kind of combined into a kind of a funhouse mirror version of the bag of tricks that Felix has. This is a bag of not things that are good tricks, I guess, but not treats, not treat like tricks, but bad tricks inside this bag.
Was there other children's media from your childhood that you feel like was really formative in either like your sensibility or your approach to your work?
I mean, I consumed so many cartoons as a kid. I was a huge fan of them. Obviously, I grew up to work in the cartoon biz, but um, I also was a pretty avid reader. I read a lot of sci-fi. Um, One of the things that's definitely influential, though, wasn't really a favorite of mine, but Alice in Wonderland was a huge influence on the world inside the bag of Uncle Bog and kind of the absurdity of it all. Which I explore further in the sequel that'll be out next summer, which is called The Twisted Tower of Endless Torment. There's a courtroom scene in that story, which is very much inspired by the courtroom scene from Alice. I love that kind of stuff. Probably one of the biggest things that I feel like I would love to live up. I would love my sensibility to be on par with Douglas Adams in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Once I discovered that when I was first I saw the PBS version, which was really, really, really silly and backwards in terms of the sci-fi. It was very, very primitive, but I loved the sense of humor, and I discovered the books, and I just swallowed them whole through my teen years, and have gone back to them a couple times. I reread the first one at least about every 10 years, if not more so. I just loved his sense of humor and absurdity and all that, and so that was a big touchstone for me as well.
What about children's horror? I mean, you can kind of say, talking about like old things that influenced you. Like for me, I must say this a million times, like 5,000 times a year when we interview people, but like for me, I feel like when I was a kid, all children's media was horror to some extent. Yeah,
Sure.
100%. And then like going back to Alice in Wonderland, there was this really bizarre mini series that was on TV with it was an all-star cast, and I think like Sammy Davis Jr. was in it, and Carol Channing, and Ringo Starr. But like there was this scene with the Jabberwocky, and it was so scary that I cried so much, and my parents were like, you don't have to watch the next part, because they did Alice in Wonderland, then Alice Through the Looking Glass. And I'm like, I'm gonna watch it, and I did, and it was.
I wish I'd seen that. I wish I'd seen that version. I never saw.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, I don't know if
sounds
it's
horrible.
available.
Sounds wonderfully horrible.
It's so creepy. There's this one thing that I always remember with Carol Channing. She's the White Queen, and she turns into the sheep, which I believe happens in the books too. But she's like, "Oh, I'm feeling much better," and like just the whole transition gave me nightmares. But I digress. All children's media was horror in like the 70s, 80s, and early 90s.
Well, I mean, I'm a child of the 80s, and I started off as a real scaredy cat when I was super young and didn't want to watch any horror, and then I kind of flipped around. And my entryway was this collection of short stories by Edgar Allan Poe that my mom gave to me while I was in the hospital. I had this surgery between 7th and 8th grade. And I was just bored in the hospital, and she gave me these short stories to read. I loved it. Before that, I'd seen her read like a million trashy and quality horror paperbacks throughout my childhood. Like I saw the first Stephen King short story collection, Night Shift. I saw her read that with the original bandaged hand with the eyes coming through the bandages on the cover. Freaked me out just seeing it across the room. Like I wanted nothing to do with that book. That she read Flowers in the Attic and Stephen King and all that kind of stuff. So it was around, but I was not a fan of it at first. And then she kind of converted me with Poe. And so I watched a million crappy horror movies on local television again, like on a Saturday afternoon when it's not really scary in the middle of the afternoon and it was safe to watch horror movies. That was kind of how I kind of geared up. And then I discovered Hitchcock, which isn't really horror, but horror adjacent. But I saw in the kind of early mid 80s Vertigo, and there were like 5 films that got rediscovered and restored and re-released theatrically, and we went and saw them all, and I loved them. I encountered Psycho one day on afternoon television. I was actually watching the beginning of it, and my mom was leaving to go out for the day, and she's like, "Oh, this is a good one, you're gonna really like this." And I watched it, and then at the end, after all the surprises happened, she came back. I'm like, what are you doing? Why didn't you warn me about this film? Because it was a little bit intense for me at that age. And she's like, oh, well, if I warned you about it, I would have spoiled it for you. I'm like, well, maybe you should have spoiled it for me. Maybe I should have waited a couple more years till I saw this. But like, so I had this kind of, I was definitely kind of had this love-hate relationship for horror for a while. First it was hate, then it was kind of love-hate, and then it eventually became just full-on love. So there's nothing, I think Poe is probably the turning point for me. But that was, after that I was just a undiscerning consumer, and I still am to this day.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking that like horror is kind of like this like weird tension between like revulsion, like being pushed away, and like curiosity and being pulled in. And I think like that is something that like kids are super attuned to because they're naturally very, very curious, and like they're into, gross and weird stuff sometimes. So
yeah.
Is that something that you're attuned to when you write, like the sort of balance between like the kind of repulsive elements and the curious elements,
I try to be. I mean, I don't think this ruins too much, but Kriebel, the gargoyle who becomes Zenith's like #1 ally in Grabog, she makes a deal with him, and she'll only help him if he gives her access to his earwax, which she calls grits. So she's feasting, she's sitting on his shoulder, feasting out of his ear the whole time that she's kind of guiding him through on his adventures. And I remember coming up with that, but I remember just like, I didn't want to be gross just for the sake of being gross, but I love this because it kind of, it served a character purpose, and it kind of serves a story purpose. Like why would this random creature just all of a sudden start helping him? And I felt like he needed a guide. We needed someone with knowledge of the place. So, it wasn't just constant, like, filling in information, but, filling information in an interesting way when necessary. So I was very happy to have that. And then I had to come up with something new for the sequel, which I won't blow. I'm writing the third book now, and I really don't have an equivalent, and I got to figure that out, but I don't know if I'll get it on this first pass, maybe on the second pass. But yeah, no, I like a little bit of gross out because I think kids enjoy that. I like the kids to be scared and drawn in. I like them. I never don't do anything that doesn't have a sense of humor to it. That's hard for me to stomach. It's hard for me to stomach as a consumer, actually, honestly. I don't believe, the worst thing to me is any kind of movie that takes it so seriously that the people inside it don't seem real, because as far as my own experience in this life has been, even at my lowest moments in my life, you have to laugh. I mean, and I don't mean that just like you should because it's good for you. I mean, as a human, I think something in you makes you laugh even at your darkest moments, because that's just what we are and who we are. At least that's who I am. So when I consume media where something so dreadfully serious, whether it's a drama, action, horror, whatever, and there's no moment where somebody stops and goes and looks around and laughs with someone else and go, this is really screwed up, isn't it? Like, then I don't feel like I'm watching humans. I feel like I can see the storyteller thinking, they think they're so important, so this is going to be serious. And I feel like I'm in tune with my kid, but I feel like that's a very adolescent point of view that I feel like doesn't serve storytelling. That like moment in your own development where you realize the world is horrible and you're horrible and everything's horrible, and hopefully you get past that to some degree, but like, that like coming from that real super serious point of view of like a 13-14-year-old where everything is so important and so serious and you can't laugh at yourself or the world around you. I hope, hopefully everybody grows out of that, because it's a bad place to be, in my opinion.
I wanted to also just kind of talk about like just all of your creatures, and you were talking about Kriebel and the earwax, and about Schlurp before. I got like a real labyrinth vibe from this story as well. Talk about children's media, which is really horror, but also awesome because David Bowie.
Labyrinth.
I really I got that sense of just perfect weird that fit together so nicely with it. Can you just talk a little bit about the different creatures that Zenith and Apogee encounter in Grabog, and also the name Grabog is just like perfectly like Henson. I loved it so much.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's not, you don't have to go deep to figure out that Grabog is a grab bag. And that's like, that was,
Wait, what?
I named it. I know. Well, sorry, I don't mean to spoil anything for you, spoil the mystery, but I named it that because I wanted to allow myself to throw anything in there that I wanted. So there's like Raggedy Albert, who's a giant 7-foot tall living rag doll. Like, well, how does that relate to the gargoyles or the schlurps or the other creatures we meet? And the answer is, I don't know. They're just all in there. That's what this world is like. And I don't worry too much about like where everything came from or how the origins and all that are. So it's like, this is what this is, similar to in Alice in Wonderland, you can have talking walruses and living cards, like all the different things that you can have, like, let's just have them. I didn't try and make anything too consistent in a way that wasn't fun or helpful. The one touchstone I did kind of try and relate things back to is the fact that it is a bag, and that the world is like sewn together, like the stitches in the bag. Actually, in Grabog, there are stitches in the ground, that this is something that somehow has been put together by someone. So like having a rag doll who's also sewn together, I felt like, oh, that works. That can work as a character. And the collectory, which is this giant tree-like thing, which is actually the kind of the metaphysical structure that runs the whole joint in a way, is it's kind of looks like it's maybe some sort of weird craft device put together by someone who sews or is a tailor or something for a living. So those kind of things, I tried to pluck those things as best I could. But again, I didn't worry about like doing that with everything. Like the gargoyles don't relate to that in any way, and some of the other creatures don't really relate to those themes in any way. And I get a little further away from it in the second book as well, as I've kind of fill out the world. It just mostly was instinct. It was like, again, I was like just kind of like pulling from the stuff like Labyrinth and like a Return to Oz, which is incredibly creepy movie. Like I just kind of have my own taste, and I decided to follow my own taste, and like hopefully when I think of something and I go, oh, that's funny, or oh, that's creepy, then I know like, yeah, that's good, then go follow that. And then when I can't come up with something, but I know I kind of have to get from point A to point B, I just go like, okay, this will work for now, and I'll make it something more when I come back to it on the second pass.
So without, spoiling too much, but can you talk at all about like what is to come in this trilogy and sort of like what's in store for readers who check out this first one?
Sure. Okay, let's try and talk about it in a non-spoiler way. So things change at the end of the first book. Things don't go back to exactly how they were, though things are resolved. But it leads to further adventures in Grabog, and they're always tied up in kind of Zenith and Apogee's relationship is always kind of central to what is going on. That's the emotional core of the whole trilogy. And basically Zenith thinks he knows what he's getting into because he's had one adventure in Grabog, but he explores different aspects of the world. He much more gets into the kind of settlements of Grabog, both small villages and larger metropolises, though a metropolis might not be quite right for what happens. But he kind of explores the culture and the civilization of Grabog a little bit more in the second book, and then we get a little bit more of the natural world in the third book. There's the Scalding Sea is mentioned in the first book, and he actually spends some time in the Scalding Sea in the third book. And there are a few things that I've seeded in the first book that come to fruition in the second and third book, like the Inquisitor is a character that is mentioned in the first book, and in the second book, the Inquisitor is the one who is supervising the trial that is happening. And it should be probably no surprise to anybody that Zenith is the one who is on trial. So there are consequences that, from what he does in the first book that not just only travel through his relationship with Apogee, but that affect Grabog and make him a known figure in Grabog and a despised figure in Grabog. So when he goes back the second time, he's not just an anonymous weirdo like all the other weirdos in there, but he is known as the dread outlaw Maelstrom. and he is sought after. So the stakes are kind of raised. He can't just wander around. He has to be more surreptitious as he tries to fulfill his second mission in Grabog without giving away too much about what he's actually doing. And the third book, which I'm figuring out right now, is a little bit. I have a little less to say about it, but it is again, things are topsy-turvy at the end of the second book, and things need to be resolved with the third adventure. So we shall see what comes of that. But like I said, he spent some time in the Scalding Sea with some strange sea creatures, and then we visit some old friends, make some new friends, as we do in book 2 as well. There's certainly we see Kriebel again. Kriebel continues to be his ally, but things spin off in a different direction than they did in the first book.
Thank you so much. This was super fun. I do hope that you'd consider talking to us again about maybe the other books.
I would talk to you anytime you want to talk to me. I love to talk, as you probably can tell.
Awesome.
Especially I'm talking about myself, even though I'm the humble Midwest boy. I've gotten over that. I've been forced to talk about myself, and now I'm used to it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you both.
So once again, this is Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. I'm Jessica. I was one of your hosts. My other host is
Jenn. Goodbye.
And our guest today was
Rob Renzetti, author of The Horrible Bag of Terrible Things, available now.
And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.